Hi, my name is Monica. Welcome to part two of my testimony. Today's topic, I will be discussing sexual abuse. And before I get started with my testimony, I thought it might be good to go over some statistics that I've recently read so that you can be informed also in case you don't know these statistics. And what I found on the internet was that 1 out of 3 girls are sexually assaulted, 1 out of 4 boys have been sexually assaulted. 85% of sexual abuse victims never report their abuse. More than 90% of abusers are people children know, love, and trust. An important fact is the way victims' families respond to abuse plays an important role in how the incident affects the victim. The reason why I'm reading these statistics to you and sharing this information with you is because I am a victim of sexual abuse. If you haven't had the opportunity yet to listen to part one of my testimony, it would probably be good that you go back and hear that. And it'll better explain how I was in the position that I was. When I was 15, unfortunately, I was once again in a situation where I would be sexually abused again. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit in case you haven't heard part one. And I just want to share with you a little bit of my background. When I was 11, my parents divorced, and pretty immediately, my mother remarried. She was having an affair, I would later find out, and she was pregnant by this man. And I would say in a very short few months of this man living in our home, he sexually assaulted me. Again, I was 11 years old. My parents were recently divorced, and I knew I had to go to my mom and tell her what happened because I was not going to let that happen again. And I shared this with her, and nothing really happened. I mean, he never assaulted me again. But again, go back to part one so you can hear exactly what I had to deal with and how I lived my life where I felt very unsafe in my home. At the age of 15, I was babysitting for some family friends, which happened to be pastors. And I loved babysitting, so I spent a lot of time with them. The pastors had 2 young children, and I was in their home quite often, babysitting the kids and spending a lot of my life there. It was nice to get out of my house, of course, with the stepdad and be around other people. And I remember at one point getting pretty close with this family and the pastor's wife coming to me and saying, "Hey, Monica, we're building a new home. Would you like to live with us? You could pick out any theme you want in your bedroom." And I thought, at 15, like, that's kind of weird. And I said, "No, but thank you." And it wasn't too long after that my mom told me we were gonna have a meeting with this pastor and his wife, and I didn't think much about it, but I remember going with my mother to a pizza place, where we lived and in the town where we lived, and I remember sitting in a booth and it being kinda dark in this restaurant, and I can kind of remember how it felt being there. And my mom and the pastor and the pastor's wife began to share with me that they had been meeting and talking about the household I was living in with the stepfather who was a pedophile, and they knew that I wasn't comfortable being there. So they all agreed that it would be best for me to move in with this pastor's family. So the decision was made for me. I was, in fact, leaving and moving in with them. And I don't know that if I was around 15, between 15 and 16, when this decision was made, I knew I didn't have a choice. It was made for me. And it was kind of strange. But then a part of me felt some relief because I felt, again, very unsafe being in my home with my mom and stepdad. But I realized something also, and I don't know if I realized immediately, but through time, I realized that instead of my mother leaving my stepdad, she decided to get rid of me, is how it felt, and stay with him. So that was pretty damaging and traumatizing. Before I go into the rest of that story, I wanted to explain the grooming process that occurs with abusers. You may know someone who has been sexually abused, maybe it's yourself. And I hope that when you hear these statistics and you hear my story, that you'll better understand how this happens to people. Because I'll be honest, even though I've walked through this, sometimes when I hear stories of sexual abuse, any type of abuse really, you think, how did that happen? And Why did that person stay? And why didn't they leave, or why didn't they get help, or why didn't they tell somebody? And unless you're in that experience, you don't understand. So I'm going to go back to some of the grooming steps that abusers take. One is they identify and target the victim. Any child or teen may be a potential victim. Some predators may be attracted to children and youth with certain characteristics, or may target youth with certain coexisting factors, such as vulnerable parents, to facilitate the crime. Another step in the process is they gain trust and access. The predator may observe the child and access his or her vulnerabilities to learn how to best approach and interact with the child. Predators may offer the victim special attention, understanding, and a sympathetic ear, and even engage the child in ways that eventually gain their trust. Another step is they play a role in the child's life. The perpetrator may manipulate the relationship so that it appears that he or she is the only one who fully understands the child or meets the child's needs in a particular way. Another step in this process is isolation of the child. Offering the child rides or taking the child out of his or her surroundings is one way that they might separate the child from others. Another step is creating secrecy around the relationship. The perpetrator may reinforce the special connection with the victim when they are alone or through private communication with the victim. The perpetrator may also threaten the victim with disclosure, suicide, physical harm to the child or loved ones, or other traumas if he or she tells. Initiating sexual contact is another step in this process. Another step is controlling the relationship. Perpetrators rely on the secrecy of the relationship to keep it going and to ensure that the child will not reveal the abuse. Children are often afraid of disclosing the abuse. They may have been told that they will not be believed. So I wanted to go through that process with you in case you don't understand how grooming works. And at the time when I moved in with this family, I didn't know that from the beginning that this was taking place. See, I really loved these people a lot. The pastor, the pastor's wife, and the children were wonderful. I loved them. I loved being with them. And living with them was so different than being with my mom. As I discussed in part one of my testimony, I shared with you that my mom had a severe anxiety disorder. So we couldn't go very many places as a family. We never went on vacations. We quite literally could not leave the state of Indiana most of the time. So when I moved in with this family, I was able to do so many things that I couldn't do back home, like travel. The first time I ever flew in an airplane was flying with this family somewhere. I was also able to be around a lot of really neat people, great pastors or Christians, musicians, and we were always hosting parties. And the pastor's wife and I were super close. We had a lot in common, and we loved decorating, and we would, get the house ready with cutting fresh flowers or ordering food from catering. And it was always just such a joyful atmosphere, a lot of fun. So at first, it was pretty great being there. I worked at the church, I volunteered, I went to a Christian school. So moving in with them, it was kind of like I was still doing all of those things, but much more. So at the time, the pastor was very popular at this church. He took a church from being kind of, there weren't very many people attending when his dad was over this church. And when he moved there and took over, and that's the time my family started to go, the church started to thrive. I mean, I think there were like 1,500, 2,000 people that started to go to this church. And he was such a great communicator. And he had this gift about him where he was super encouraging. So when I was living there and he would say things to me like how great I was, or he would, you're so creative, Monica, you're gifted in this area. I didn't think a lot about it because that's who he was. That was his gifting. And this church provided a lot of care even for the community, and they still do. So there were a lot of great things about this church. But what I started to experience when I was living there started to change my view about things. I can give a few examples. Now, remember, I came out of a household where my stepfather had sexually assaulted me. I went to my mother, and instead of him being accountable for what he did, she removed me from that situation. So, of course, that was hurtful. That was already traumatizing. So now I'm in this household, and things have been great. I've been able to meet a lot of people, experience a lot of wonderful things. I was very encouraged by these people, and they took me in not just as a girl that was living with them. They treated me like family. I traveled with them. I spent a lot of time with their extended family members. I was on their Christmas cards. They introduced me to their church as their daughter. In fact, they went to my father and asked him if they could adopt me. They wanted to change my last name to their last name. He said no. But so that's kind of how things were going. They were going in the direction of me becoming super close with them. And at that same time, I was becoming more and more isolated from my family. Some of that wasn't the pastor's doing. Some of it was just because my mom was with the pedophile, my dad was with someone else, my sister ended up marrying young, and my brother was trying to we were a very broken family, so it was pretty easy to pull away from my family, but the pastor's family also isolated me a lot from my family.